Begin seated in a butterfly position with the soles of your feet together and your spine neutral. Have your hands holding on to your ankles. To begin, gently bounce the knees towards the floor. Allow the fronts of the hips to relax and open as you do so. Continue the bounces for about 8 to 10 repetitions. Then, find a twist. Place one hand behind your hips on the floor and the other to your opposite knee. Press the knee down as you look around the corner, opening your chest and increasing the stretch in the hip. Hold for a breath or two, and then release and repeat to the opposite side. As you return to center, grab onto your ankles and puff the chest. Send your rib cage forward and your head back as you open across the front of the body. Hold here for 2 to 3 breaths. And then release. Bring your hands to plant behind you with your fingertips towards you and elbows bent away from you. Allow the hips to open as much as possible in your butterfly position. Begin to rock from side to side. Engage the glutes to open the front of the hips even more as you rock. Continue to alternate right and left 8 times. Then extend the legs out in front of you. Press through the hands and stack your spine to vertical. Flex the feet completely and engage the quads to maintain straight legs. Bring the legs all the way together. Keeping your heels touching, begin to engage your outer hip muscles and turn out, bringing the pinky toes towards the floor. Then return to neutral with the big toes together. Continue to open and close the feet about 8 times. Finishing with your legs turned out. Keeping the legs straight and externally rotated, begin to flex and point through the feet. Articulate through the toes as you do so. Continue to point and flex 8 times. As the toes point, turn the legs back to parallel. Come onto your fingertips behind you to encourage a tall, neutral spine. Keeping the legs engaged and the feet pointed, begin to wave your torso forward over your thighs. Lead from the heart first and allow the head to trail behind. Continue these waves 4 to 6 times. Then bend the knees, hug onto your thighs, and gently roll yourself down onto your back. Plant your hands flat on the floor and your feet flat with your knees bent up towards the ceiling. Sweep your arms out beside you and bend the elbows to 90 degrees. Make fists with your hands so that your knuckles point straight up towards the ceiling. Extend through both arms, reaching your fists directly in front of your shoulders towards the ceiling. And then, as if pulling a resistance band, bend the elbows back to their original position. Continue to extend and bend through the arms 8 times. Keeping the hands and fists and the elbows bent at 90 degrees, begin to rotate from the shoulder, taking the backs of the hands to the floor, rotating through center, and then the fronts of the knuckles towards the ground. Continue rotating back and forward about 8 times, finishing with the backs of the hands to the floor. Open your fists, extending through your hands, trying to keep your fingertips and even backs of the hands on the floor. Begin to slide the hands up and down just about 6 inches. Continue this slide, moving from the shoulder blades 8 times. Then extend your arms completely overhead with your palms up towards the ceiling. Keeping your belly glued down towards your spine, begin to lift opposite arm and knee. The foot will flex and the arm reaches up towards the opposite leg. Continue to alternate lifting and lowering in opposition 8 times. When both feet are planted, sweep your arms open to a T and turn your palms down. Allow both knees to fall to one side. Let the top leg swing, brushing your big toe along the floor and reaching for your opposite fingertips. Then reverse the direction and bring the knees back to neutral. Repeat on the opposite side. Allow the knees to fall, swing the top leg, and then bring it back to neutral. Alternate these attitude swings from side to side 8 times. When your knees are back to center, extend them up towards the ceiling. Flex your feet and internally rotate your thigh bones. Keep the knees glued together as the heels circle outwards in opposition of one another. Keep the thigh bones internally rotated until the heels complete their circle. When the heels reach your hips, point the feet and extend them back up to the ceiling. Continue this, flexing, circling the heels out and around, pointing and extending to the ceiling 4 times, finishing with your legs up to the ceiling. With the legs straight, flex through the feet and turn out from the hip. Try to get the backs of the thighs to face towards one another. The heel should touch and the toe should point outwards. Begin to separate the legs, just slightly wider than your hips. Then drag the heels together, moving from your inner thighs. Continue to open and squeeze the legs closed 8 times. Keeping the legs slightly wider than your hips, begin to bend the knees. Try to maintain the soles of the feet towards the ceiling as you do so. Continue to bend and then extend to the original position 4 times. As they bend, grab the insides of the arches for a happy baby position. Pull the knees down outside your torso and widen across the front of your chest. Hold here for 3 to 5 breaths, pulling the legs down towards the floor. Then close your legs. Send your feet up and over your head for a plow pose. Keep the toes pointed and bring your hands to your low back for support. Be sure that your elbows are narrow. Hold here for 3 to 5 breaths, encouraging the hips further over your head. And then, with your final exhale, roll down through the spine one vertebrae at a time. Bend your knees and then extend your legs long along the floor in front of you. Come up onto your forearms and look forward. Be sure that your shoulders are stacked directly over your elbows and press out of your arms to lengthen through your neck and chest. With both toes pointed, begin to flex one foot. Bend the knee and drag the heel towards your sit bone. Then push the heel away, extending through the leg, and lift the leg off of the floor. Continue reaching through the back of the leg as you lower it with control. Continue this sequence, bending the knee, extending the knee, lifting the leg and lowering the leg 4 to 8 times on the same side. Then roll away from the working leg, stacking your hips and turning your forearm to support you. When your hips are stacked in this side laying position, bend the top knee and grab the ankle with your free hand. Tuck the pelvis as you pull the heel towards your hips, creating a quadriceps stretch. Be sure that the knee is moving behind you rather than creasing at the hip and folding forward. Open the front of the hips to stretch the thigh. Hold here for 3 to 5 breaths. Then release the leg, extending it, and roll back to center. Repeat on the opposite side. Be sure that your shoulders are stacked directly over your elbows and press out of your arms to lengthen through your neck and chest. With both toes pointed, begin to flex one foot. Bend the knee and drag the heel towards your sit bone. Then push the heel away, extending through the leg, and lift the leg off of the floor. Continue reaching through the back of the leg as you lower it with control. Continue this sequence, bending the knee, extending the knee, lifting the leg and lowering the leg 4 to 8 times on the same side. Then roll away from the working leg, stacking your hips and turning your forearm to support you. When your hips are stacked in this side laying position, bend the top knee and grab the ankle with your free hand. Tuck the pelvis as you pull the heel towards your hips, creating a quadriceps stretch. Be sure that the knee is moving behind you rather than creasing at the hip and folding forward. Open the front of the hips to stretch the thigh. Hold here for 3 to 5 breaths. Then release the leg, extending it, and roll back to center. Come up to seated. Swing your legs around in front of you and open your legs into a straddle position, widening as far as possible. Engage your thighs and flex through the feet. Interlace your hands and bring them to the base of your skull with your elbows wide. With an inhale, bring your elbow towards your thigh. Then exhale and return to center. Repeat on the opposite side. Continue these active side bends, keeping your sit bones firmly planted on the floor, moving from right to left about 8 times. Then point through the feet and release the arms, and reach the arms out to your sides. Create a side bend, reaching one hand for the floor and sweeping the opposite arm up and over your head. Hold here, taking your gaze towards the ceiling. Then, with an exhale, fold over your leg, turning your chest and squaring it towards your kneecap. Fold here, holding for a breath, and then take your gaze up to the ceiling. Peel your arm up so your fingertips reach directly up, and then pull yourself back up to center. Repeat on the opposite side. Alternate this side bending sequence, side to side, 4 times. As you return to center, bend one knee into you. Shift your weight up and over as you swivel the shin behind you and roll into half of a middle split. Be sure that the bent knee is bent at 90 degrees and the foot is flexed with the inner ankle to the ground. And then engage the straight leg, making sure that the quadricep is active. That foot should also be flexed with the inner ankle and inner thigh pointed towards the ground. Keeping your hips up and over your legs, begin to rotate your straight leg. Externally rotate so that the toes point up towards the ceiling, and then internally rotate, pressing your big toe into the ground. Be sure not to alternate the rest of the shape. Stay stable through the hips and isolate the action at the top of the thigh. Continue to internally and externally rotate the leg 8 times. Finishing with the big toe pressing down into the ground like you started. Then begin to bend one elbow and the other, shifting the weight and the stretch between one leg and then the other leg. Continue these elbow bends 8 times, alternating sides. Then, reverse the swivel. Shift your weight back and tuck the leg underneath you, sitting back on your sit bones. Then extend both legs back into your straddle position. Point the toes, engage the quads, and extend your fingertips to the floor at your sides. Begin to make sweeping circles with the arms and the upper body. Bend to the side, sweeping your arm over your ear. Then circle your body and arms forward through the front space until you find the side bend on the other side. Then press up and over the top to return to where you started. Then reverse the direction. Tip up and over, finding the side bend. Sweep through the center, finding the opposite side bend, and then return to where you began. Continue these circles or sways, alternating sides about 4 times. As you return to center, bend your opposite knee into you and rock up and over, finding half of a middle split on the opposite side. Be sure that the bent knee is bent at 90 degrees and the foot is flexed with the inner ankle to the ground. And then engage the straight leg, making sure that the quadricep is active. That foot should also be flexed with the inner ankle and inner thigh pointed towards the ground. Keeping your hips up and over your legs, begin to rotate your straight leg. Externally rotate so that the toes point up towards the ceiling, and then internally rotate, pressing your big toe into the ground. Be sure not to alternate the rest of the shape. Stay stable through the hips and isolate the action at the top of the thigh. Continue to internally and externally rotate the leg 8 times. Finishing with the big toe pressing down into the ground like you started. Then begin to bend one elbow and the other, shifting the weight and the stretch between one leg and then the other leg. Continue these elbow bends 8 times, alternating sides. Press into your hands and bend your extended leg. Walk your knees to a kneeling position with knees and thighs together. Then plant your hands in front of you, tuck your toes underneath you, and begin to extend the legs into a standing forward fold with your hands on the ground. turn the legs out, bringing your heels together and your knees pointing outward over your toes. Try to relax your torso and the back of your neck. Feel free to come onto your finger pads or even place your hands on blocks to ground your hands into the floor. In this turned out first position, begin to shift your weight from side to side, lifting the ball of the foot off of the floor on one foot and then switching, shifting the weight into your heels one at a time. Continue to alternate these toe lifts, right and left, 8 times. Then, with both feet flat on the floor, begin to bend one knee and bend the other. Again, try to release your torso as much as possible. Continue to alternate these single knee bends, right and left, 8 times. When the legs are straight, roll yourself up to standing and place your hands on your hips. Begin to sweep one leg side, activating at the hips and quads in order to lift the leg. Be sure not to tip the pelvis as you do so. Lift the leg to only about 45 degrees with the toes and knee pointed up towards the ceiling. Lift and lower the leg back to first position 4 times, finishing with the leg lifted. With the leg up, begin to rotate from the hip. Turn the toes and knees to face forward, and then turn out so the toes and knee faces up towards the ceiling. Continue to internally and externally rotate in this way 8 times, finishing turned out. Repeat on the opposite side. Begin to sweep one leg side, activating at the hips and quads in order to lift the leg. Be sure not to tip the pelvis as you do so. Lift the leg to only about 45 degrees with the toes and knee pointed up towards the ceiling. Lift and lower the leg back to first position 4 times, finishing with the leg lifted. With the leg up, begin to rotate from the hip. Turn the toes and knees to face forward, and then turn out so the toes and knee faces up towards the ceiling. Continue to internally and externally rotate in this way 8 times, finishing turned out. Then, keeping the legs turned out, step your feet wide into a second position with the heels just outside your hips. Lift one heel off of the ground, finding a high releve. Then, bend the knees, coming into a deep grand plie. Then, extend through the legs and bring the heel back down to the floor. Repeat on the opposite side. Lift the heel, bend the knees, dropping the hips as much as possible. Then extend through the legs, squeezing the quads, lowering the heel at the top. Continue these grand plies right and left with a heel lift 8 times. Bend one knee so that the knee tracks directly over the toes. Use the same side hand to push the knee back, encouraging external rotation at the hip. Then extend through the leg, straightening completely, and repeat on the other side. Continue these single knee bends with a press, alternating from side to side 8 times. Then you may need to heel-toe your feet slightly closer together. Bend your knees a lot and come down into a primal squat. Press your arms into your thighs to open your chest and press your knees back. Try to stack your spine as much as possible as you swing the hips forward in between your legs, creating as vertical of a spine as possible. Then plant your hands on the floor. Keeping a nice long spine, begin to lift your hips as if moving towards a straight leg forward fold. Keep the knees bent though, only going as far as you receive a stretch. Attempt to send your sit bones to the wall behind you. Then, drop the hips, tucking the pelvis, and bring your hands to your thighs again, pressing your knees back and stacking your spine. Continue to move between these two positions 8 times in total. When you find your primal squat for the last time, sweep your arms overhead, finding your balance. Hold here for 3 to 5 breaths, keeping your arms straight and fingers energized, and try to keep your triceps by your ears. Then begin to pulse the arms behind you, thumbs pointed back and palms facing one another. Engage the shoulders down the back as you pulse 8 times, increasing the opening of the chest. Then plant your hands in front of you, turn your heels to parallel, and fold, straightening the legs into a parallel, wide-legged forward fold. Relax your neck and your torso as you fall over your thighs. Keeping your quads engaged, begin to lift one heel to a high releve. Then, placing that heel down, lift the opposite heel. Continue to alternate, lifting one heel and then the other, 8 times. Try not to soften the knees at all. Keeping the legs engaged, flex the feet so that the toes come off of the floor. Begin to twist from side to side, shifting the toes to point one direction and then the other. Continue to swish the toes from side to side 8 times. Then, plant the feet to neutral. Putting the weight into your hands, begin to slide your legs apart, finding a full middle split. Be sure that everything is in one straight line from heel to heel, and that your pelvis is sinking as much as possible. Squeeze the thighs to protect the knee joints here. As you hold your middle split, perform 3 ankle circles moving backwards and 3 ankle circles moving forwards. Then, sit your hips back to a seated position and come to find a narrow V. Hands can be behind you to help encourage a neutral spine, and legs should be extended with the feet flexed. Keeping the legs completely straight, begin to internally rotate the thighs, bringing one big toe to the ground and then the other. The hips may rock off the floor just slightly. Continue to alternate from side to side about 8 times. Then begin to walk the hands further behind you, turning the fingertips to face you and bending the elbows back behind you. Begin to arch and curl through the pelvis, and allowing that arch and curl to ripple through the entire spine. Continue to alternate between these positions about 8 times. Then, pressing through your arms, come back to sit. Walk your feet in and bend your knees. Then, grab a block. Place the block on the floor behind you at a medium setting. Try to find the spot just below your shoulder blades. Arch up and back, allowing your body to rest on the block. Bring your hands behind your head to support the weight. If your head can find the floor, allow it to rest there. Hold here for 3 to 5 breaths, allowing the hips and the head to heavy towards the floor, feeling the chest and ribs open towards the ceiling. Then, release your hands and plant them by your hips. Press up through the spine, stacking back to vertical, and find yourself in a comfortable cross-legged position.